Let me tell you something about Christmas in our house. It never belonged to everyone. Sure, there were stockings and lights, cinnamon rolls, and a crackling fireplace like you'd find in a catalog. But underneath the decorations and sugar-coated traditions was something colder. Something tight and quiet. The kind of cold that didn't come from snowflakes or a drafty window, but from years of knowing exactly where you stood and who mattered most. This particular Christmas, the air felt heavier than usual, like the walls were pressing in just a little. The tree stood in the corner with the same ornaments we'd used since I was a kid, most of them chipped or peeling, but sentimental, as my dad, Greg, always said. My mom, Sharon, had draped the mantel with garlands and fake pine cones, playing along, humming half-heartedly to a song I'm sure she wasn't even listening to. And then there was Lila. Of course, Lila. There she sat, already in full performance mode, cross-legged in designer pajama pants, her honey blonde hair braided over one shoulder, a mug of cocoa in her hands like she was on the cover of a winter fashion blog. She had always been able to curate her life into perfect little vignettes. Even now, her mug matched her socks. I didn't even know people own matching mugs and socks. Look at you, Dad said with that twinkle in his eye, the one he reserved only for her. My Christmas angel. He handed her a gold-wrapped box, topped with a satin ribbon tied so perfectly I wondered if he'd hired someone just to wrap it. Open it, sweetheart. She giggled. Yes, giggled, and said, Daddy, you shouldn't have, even though we all knew he should have and would have, and always did. I sat quietly with my envelope resting in my lap. Thin. Barely sealed. No ribbon. No bow. I already knew it was a throwaway gift. I already knew I was background noise. But Lila, she peeled the wrapping slowly, theatrically, her manicured nails gliding across the paper like she was on camera. Her lips formed an exaggerated, "Oh my God," before the gift was even visible. And then, she lifted the lid and saw it, a silver key, small and gleaming, nestled inside a velvet-lined box. The room held its breath for her. Her face lit up, and not subtly. No, Lila's reactions came in sweeping cinematic strokes. Her eyes widened like someone had just handed her a kingdom. Her mouth opened in a gasp so practiced, so precise, that if you blinked, you might think she had been genuinely surprised. You bought me a house, she squealed. I didn't even need to look at Dad's face to know he was beaming. That proud, glowing look, the one where his whole body leaned into the joy of pleasing her, was so familiar it made me nauseous. We bought her a house, Dad said, his voice thick with pride like he'd just announced she had invented the cure for a rare disease. Our Lila's worked so hard. She deserves it. My mother, sitting beside him in her pale blue robe, gave a small, tight smile. That's all. No tears, no fanfare. She was a background actor in the scene, same as me. Lila stood up, squealing again as she threw her arms around them. Oh my God, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, she sang, like a broken record stuck on praise. No one looked at me. And that's the thing, I was there. I was right there. Breathing the same air. Sitting on the same couch. Holding my envelope like a prop in someone else's movie. But I was invisible. Expected to smile and nod. To clap for Lila's spotlight without once daring to want one of my own. Here, Sharon said finally, reaching for the envelope in my lap and pushing it toward me like it was a reminder she had almost forgotten. This is for you. I opened it in silence. There was no key inside. No house. No build-up. Just a single sheet of printer paper folded in half. A check, maybe. Or one of those pre-written cards with a generic message scribbled in cursive ink. I didn't even care what it said. The contents weren't important. The message had already been delivered. You don't matter like she does. Now, let me pause and say something because you might be thinking I'm overreacting. That I'm reading too much into it. That maybe Lila earned it. Maybe I'm being ungrateful. Maybe this is all in my head. But if you'd lived inside my skin for as long as I have, if you'd sat through the birthdays, the school awards, the whispered, "At least you're good at something," comments after I achieved anything remotely impressive, you'd understand. This wasn't a one-time oversight. This was the tradition. Lila gets castles. I get crumbs. I didn't cry. That would have been too satisfying for them, proof that I was too sensitive, too emotional, too much. Instead, I smiled. Or at least, I tried to. Thanks, I said, sliding the paper back into the envelope. No one asked what I got. No one asked if I liked it. Greg had already returned to basking in Lila's joy like it was sunlight, and Sharon had gone back to sipping her lukewarm tea. You should see the backyard, Greg was saying, his arm around Lila's shoulder. Big, open, and it's only a 10-minute drive from that Pilates studio you like. Oh my God, that's perfect. Lila squealed again, like it was her job to echo the universe back at itself in gratitude. And maybe it was. Maybe that's how she had gotten so good at being loved, by never letting anyone forget she deserved it. I stared down at the floor, the pine needles from the tree gathering around my slippers like they were trying to comfort me. I'm not saying I expected a house. I'm not even saying I wanted one. What I'm saying is, I wanted to feel like I mattered. You know that feeling when you're in a group photo, but someone crops you out before posting it? That flash of recognition that you were only ever tolerated, not truly included? That's what it felt like. Every year. And this year? This year, something in me curled up tight. This year, something in me whispered, never again. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. I just sat there, watching, waiting, holding my envelope like a flag in a silent war I hadn't started but could no longer ignore. Merry Christmas, right? You ever try to measure your own worth in glances? In the number of times someone clapped for you? In how many "I'm proud of yous" you didn't get? Because I did. For years. I measured myself in what I didn't receive. Not because I wanted to be dramatic. Not because I needed to be showered in praise. I just wanted to be seen. But when you grow up as the second choice, the default, the spare, seeing clearly becomes a kind of curse. You see everything too clearly. Especially the moments they pretend were nothing personal. Let me take you back. Not all the way, just to a few stops along the path they paved with favoritism and denial. I was 9 the first time I really understood what it meant to be invisible. It was the night before my birthday. I'd asked for cupcakes instead of cake that year, homemade, vanilla frosting, rainbow sprinkles. I was so excited, I couldn't sleep. I snuck downstairs, thinking maybe, just maybe, Mom and Dad, Greg and Sharon, had decorated the kitchen like they used to when Lila had her special days. But when I walked in, the lights were off. No balloons. No banner. Just Sharon standing by the stove, making burnt toast while Greg scrolled through his phone, deep in conversation about Lila's ballet rehearsal the next morning. Go on, she said without looking at me. You wanted cupcakes, didn't you? The mix is in the cupboard. I remember the weight of the silence. I remember how loud my heartbeat felt as I stood on a chair, pouring the mix into the bowl under the yellow kitchen light. I frosted them with shaky hands, then carried the tray up to my room, hoping maybe it was just a misunderstanding. That maybe I'd wake up to something special. I didn't. The next morning, the only thing waiting for me was the smell of that same burnt toast. Lila's ballet bag sat by the door, packed neatly. Sharon kissed her on the head and said, "Good luck today, sweetheart." No one said happy birthday. Not even once. I told myself it was an accident. That they were just busy. That maybe they'd surprise me later. They didn't. That was the first time I realized that effort in our family didn't guarantee recognition. It only did if you were Lila. Fast forward a few years, high school. Science fair season. While other kids hot-glued baking soda volcanoes and styrofoam solar systems, I built a hydroelectric dam. A working one, with turbines and water flow simulations. I stayed up for nights testing the voltage output, adjusting the angles, writing reports. I presented it to my teacher with my hands trembling and my stomach twisted in knots. When she smiled and said, "Maya, this is incredible. You should enter the state competition," I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Like maybe I could finally be seen. I won. First place. The moment my name was called, my chest swelled. I scanned the crowd, searching for Greg's eyes, for Sharon's quiet nod of approval. They weren't there. Greg had a golf game. Sharon was driving Lila to a last-minute audition. They sent a text. One line. No punctuation. Congrats on the win. And when Lila landed a shampoo commercial 2 weeks later, they threw a dinner party. The neighbors came. They popped champagne. Sharon printed the ad and framed it in the hallway like it was a graduation photo. Greg made a toast about hard work and talent. I remember standing in the hallway, looking at that framed picture and wondering if anyone remembered the hydroelectric dam. If they had even seen it. If they even knew what I had built. But of course, they didn't. And then there was the scholarship ceremony. Senior year. I had poured everything into that application essay. Sleepless nights. Doubt. Rewrites. I still remember the line I ended it with. I want to be a light in dark places, even if I'm the only one shining. They called my name on stage. I walked across, heart pounding, trying to soak in the applause, the smiles from my classmates, the pride from my teachers. I looked into the audience, and there she was, Sharon. Not clapping, not smiling, just scrolling through her phone. I held the certificate in my hand and walked down the steps. She glanced up for half a second. Well, at least you're good at something, she muttered, loud enough for the woman beside her to shift uncomfortably. I laughed it off, of course. That's what I did. That's what I always did. I laughed. I minimized. I made it a joke so it wouldn't hurt as badly. But it did. It always did. And here's the thing no one tells you about being the reliable one, the easy child. You think it's a compliment at first. You think being low maintenance means being strong. But what it really means is, you learn to survive on less. On scraps of affection. On praise that always feels like it's begrudgingly given. You learn to live in the silence between everyone else's cheers. Because Lila? She got standing ovations. She got, "You're amazing," and "We're so lucky to have you." She got speeches and flowers and family group chats named after her accomplishments. Me? I got, "Well, you didn't mess up." I got, "Not bad." I got, "We forgot to get a card, but here's a check." And here's the worst part. For a long time, I believed it was my fault. I thought maybe if I smiled more, they'd love me louder. If I didn't complain, they'd see I was worth more than the silence they gave me. I told myself to be grateful that they didn't have to care, and at least I wasn't being actively hurt. But passive neglect? It's still pain. Especially when it's decorated with cinnamon rolls and topped with ribbons every December. So yes, maybe that Christmas morning sitting there, watching Lila clutch a house key while I held a thin, meaningless envelope, was just the latest chapter. But it wasn't isolated. It wasn't out of the blue. It was a pattern. A long, detailed quilt stitched together with subtle dismissal, sewn with selective love, and wrapped around one daughter while the other sat in the cold. That daughter was me. Still is. At least, that's how it felt. But sometimes all it takes is one winter, one silent Christmas morning, to realize you've been cold long enough. I wasn't planning to go back home so soon after Christmas. Honestly, I thought I'd managed to escape fast enough that the guilt wouldn't catch me. But guilt has a funny way of creeping in, not from your own conscience, but from someone else's voice saying, "You never come around anymore." That voice belonged to Greg. My dad. 2 phone calls in 1 week, each one layered in that particular brand of parental guilt that somehow sounded both helpless and accusing. Pulled something in my back moving snow, he'd grunted on the first call, like he was dragging the words up from somewhere ancient and pained. Got a bunch of stuff in the garage that needs moving. Figured I could use an extra set of hands. I waited for him to add, "Only if you're not too busy," but of course, he didn't. Greg didn't ask. He informed. He assumed. The second call came just 2 days later. "We haven't seen you since the holidays," he said, ignoring the fact that the holidays had been 2 weeks ago. "Lila's been busy too, but she'll probably swing by next month. You should stop in. Stay a while." I said I'd think about it. Then Sharon texted. Not, "How are you?" Not, "Miss you." Not even, "Hope work is going okay." Just, "If you do come this weekend, bring gloves. The garage is freezing." So warm and motherly, right? And so, against better judgment and without enthusiasm, I made the drive back. Just 2.5 hours, but it felt longer. Like each mile stripped a layer of distance I'd worked so hard to build. Their neighborhood hadn't changed. Still pristine. Still absurdly curated. Every lawn looked like it was managed by a landscaping committee. The wreath on their front door was the same one from last year, plastic pine, faded red ribbon, and a brass G in the middle like they needed to brand the house to remind us all who was king. I stepped inside and was greeted by the scent of eucalyptus and lemonwood polish. Sharon's doing, no doubt. She liked things clean, sterile, symmetrical. The living room was museum-level perfect. Not a pillow out of place. Not a mug left on a coaster. And of course, the walls still looked like a personal shrine to Lila. Picture after picture, achievement after achievement, her dance recitals, her college graduation, her headshots. Even the shampoo commercial ad was still there, framed like a magazine cover. And me? You'd have to really squint. Maybe there was one photo from middle school, tucked behind a lamp. Greg was in the garage when I arrived. He greeted me with a grunt, a pat on the back, and a pair of thick gloves. Boxes by the shelves, he said. Just need help getting them up to the attic. The ladder's out. Not a single question about my job, my apartment, my life. The only update I got from Sharon during dinner was about Lila's boyfriend. Apparently, she wasn't impressed. He's got no drive, she said, sipping wine. No vision. Can't even hold a conversation without talking about crypto. But Lila's in love, so what can you do? Greg sighed dramatically, as if Lila's love life were a national crisis. They spent the rest of the meal talking about the lake house. That lake house. They talked about it with reverence, like it was some ancestral artifact passed down through generations, though they'd only owned it for a few years. It'll be perfect by summer, Greg said. New deck, new paint, maybe even a hot tub if we can swing it. Sharon nodded. We'll finally be able to host. I want it to be special. Something Lila can use for her brand. Maybe shoot content out there. I sat across from them, chewing slowly, wondering if they even noticed I hadn't said a word in 10 minutes. Spoiler, they didn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from the mattress, which was the same lumpy one I grew up on. Not from the cold, even though my old room had always run 5 degrees colder than the rest of the house. It was the memories. Being in that room again made them louder. The trophies lined up on the shelf. The ribbons, the books, my things, my accomplishments, never celebrated, just stored. Preserved like a quiet reminder that I had existed, even if no one remembered why. I got up, walked barefoot down the hall, past the hallway of Lila's golden glow, and stopped outside the office. The door was open. That was weird. Greg's office was his sacred ground. He locked it at night, double-checked it like he did the front door. He didn't even let Sharon organize his files. But that night, the door hung open just a crack, like it had been forgotten. I told myself not to look, not to go inside, not to care. But I was already walking in before I could finish telling myself that. The air inside smelled like paper and old cologne. I stood there in the soft hum of silence, staring at the mahogany desk, the shelves full of real estate manuals, the leather chair still imprinted with Greg's shape. Then I saw it. The wall safe. Open. Not wide open, just cracked. The handle slightly askew. But for Greg, that was unthinkable. He treated that safe like a vault in a spy movie. Double-checked every dial. Every night. Without fail. I stood still, heart pounding, wondering if I should close it and walk away. But my curiosity had been denied for too many years. I stepped forward and pulled the door open just a little more. Inside were the usual things: folders, tax files, a few bank envelopes, an old watch box. And then I saw it. An envelope. Unmarked, except for a single line written in Greg's blocky handwriting, to be opened upon death. I should have walked away. I know that. But how many times do you get to see the version of the truth your family has been hiding behind lock and key? My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a will. But not the one Greg had paraded around a few years ago when he made a big show at Thanksgiving about fairness, and splitting everything evenly. This will? My name was listed first. And next to it? A property. A house. One I had never seen. Never been told about. Registered in my name. A house bought nearly 5 years ago. My stomach turned. My fingers flew through the pages like they could rewrite themselves if I didn't move fast enough. Bank statements. Transfers. Deeds. Then came the signatures. My name. Only it wasn't my handwriting. It was close. Scary close. But not mine. I had been used. Someone, Greg, had forged my name. For loans. For asset transfers. For purchases. And Sharon? She signed as a witness on at least 3 of them. They weren't just ignoring me. They were using me. I stood there in the quiet, a storm ripping through my insides, and something in me changed. Something deep. Final. Because that night didn't just expose a secret. It shattered every last excuse I had ever made for them. Have you ever opened something and instantly wished you hadn't? Not because you didn't want to know, but because knowing means you can never unknow it again? That's exactly how it felt the moment I flipped through the pages of that will. Standing in Greg's office, the overhead light humming above me, the carpet soft under my bare feet, I read through words that made my hands go cold. I read until the legal language blurred into something brutal and personal. There it was, my name. Clear as day. Listed first. Not equal, not second, not footnoted under, also included. First. Next to it, an address. A property. A house. One I'd never seen. Never stepped foot inside. Never been told about. And according to the deed, it had been purchased 5 years ago. Under my name. I didn't feel excited. I didn't feel honored. I felt sick. You know that sense of nausea that creeps up when you realize the foundation beneath your feet was never real? That it was all just a performance you didn't know you were part of? Yeah, that kind of sick. My fingers trembled as I dug deeper through the papers. There were loan documents, bank statements, all tied to my name. Pages and pages of financial decisions I had supposedly made. Except I hadn't. Ever. And then I saw it. A familiar shape. My signature. Except it wasn't mine. Not even close. Close enough to fool someone glancing. But not close enough for me. I know my own handwriting. I know the tilt of my Y, the way I loop my A. The one on these documents? It was like someone had tried to mimic me after watching from across the room. And suddenly it clicked. They had used me. All these years, while I thought I was just the invisible one, the background character in Lila's shining biopic, I had actually been something worse. I was useful. The responsible one. The reliable one. The one who wouldn't ask too many questions. The one who filed her taxes early, didn't bounce checks, and never caused problems. I was the perfect cover. The clean name. The blank canvas they could paint their mess onto. And they had. Repeatedly. Page after page, I watched it unfold. Transfers made under my identity. A trust fund with my name but no access. Accounts I never opened. Loans taken out against properties I never owned. I dropped into Greg's leather chair like the wind had been knocked out of me. This wasn't just about favoritism anymore. It wasn't about emotional neglect or Lila being the chosen one. This was fraud. This was theft. This was betrayal so layered it made my stomach twist in ways I didn't know were possible. And Sharon had signed off on it. I found her name scrawled as a witness on 2 loan applications. One of them from 4 years ago, when I was working overtime in a cramped apartment just to afford rent and groceries. They were using my credit, my identity, while I was scraping by. And they never said a word. Not a single word. No apology. No slip. No accidental mention. Just silence. Because as far as they were concerned, I was never supposed to know. And that is what shattered me the most. It wasn't just that they did it. It was that they did it so confidently, so completely, certain I would never find out. I sat in that office for over an hour, the documents spread out on the desk, my heart racing. My mouth dry. I flipped through statements like they were flashcards of betrayal. Like each one was a receipt for every time they looked me in the eye and pretended everything was fine. I could still hear Sharon's voice from earlier that night. Bring gloves. The garage is freezing. I could still hear Greg talking about the lake house renovations like it was a dream come true. Like his dream. His future. I understood now. That house? That dream? They built it using me. And then, something in me snapped. Not loudly. Not violently. Not in a way anyone could hear. It was quiet. Cold. Like a click inside my chest. I stood up slowly and started gathering the papers. Not to destroy them. Not to confront anyone. Not yet. I was done reacting. This time, I was going to act. You know what people like Greg and Sharon count on? Silence. They count on you not asking questions. On being so grateful for the crumbs that you never look for the cake. Well, I was done with crumbs. I took photos of everything. Every page. Every forged signature. Every hidden transaction. I snapped them with my phone one by one, carefully, deliberately. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth. And power. Because here's the thing. Once you have truth, you have leverage. And after a lifetime of feeling like I was just wallpaper in my own family, I was finally holding something that mattered. Something they didn't want me to have. I returned the papers to the safe just as I found them. Left everything exactly in place. The handles slightly ajar. The documents stacked in the same neat order. If they noticed anything was off in the morning, they'd assume Greg forgot to close it. He wouldn't question it. They never suspected me of anything. Because I had never been the kind of daughter who did things. Just the one who endured them. That night, I barely slept. I lay in my old bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sound of the heater creaking through the vents. My thoughts raced. Not with fear. Not even with anger. With clarity. I thought about every time they'd told me to be grateful. Every time they had minimized me. Every Christmas where I smiled politely while Lila got vacations and keys to luxury apartments, and I got hand lotion and vague apologies. I thought about the way Greg had always dismissed my successes as practical, while Sharon never even looked up when I spoke. And now I knew why. They didn't have to value me. They had already taken from me what they needed. But they didn't plan on me discovering it. And they definitely didn't plan on what would come next. I left in the morning without much fanfare. Sharon handed me a bag of leftovers like it was some grand act of maternal generosity. Drive safe, she said, already walking away. Greg mumbled something about the garage being in better shape. Thanks for the help, kiddo. That was it. They didn't know that I had just uncovered a secret that would change everything. They didn't know they had finally pushed me too far. They didn't know I had already made my first call to a lawyer during my drive back to the city. And the best part? I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to demand answers or throw the evidence on the dinner table in a dramatic outburst. That's not how you win with people like them. You win by letting them believe you're still playing your part, while you quietly rewrite the script. There's something quietly powerful about being underestimated. I never realized it until I had my proof, until I held their secrets in my hands, and they didn't even flinch because they thought I was still asleep. Greg and Sharon had built their whole strategy on the assumption that I was harmless. Passive. Predictable. The daughter who didn't cause trouble, didn't ask too many questions, didn't make demands. But they'd confuse silence with weakness. And that was their first mistake. When I got back to my apartment after that weekend, I didn't cry. I didn't scream into a pillow or pace the floor with my fists clenched. I made tea, sat in the corner of my living room, laid every document out on the floor like puzzle pieces, and I just stared at them. Not emotionally. Strategically. I had never planned revenge before. Never even considered it. I was the peacekeeper, remember? The one who played the middle ground so well I practically disappeared into it. But now? Now I wasn't trying to be seen. I was trying to win. The first thing I did was look up someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Noelle. An old college friend who went into law. I remembered how fiercely she debated professors in class, how calm she was even when tearing apart a case file. She wasn't the kind of lawyer who flinched at messy family drama. When I called her, I was direct. I need help. Quietly. I have documents, wills, property transfers, loan paperwork, all tied to my name. None of which I authorized. There was a pause. Then her voice sharpened. Come in tomorrow. Bring everything. So I did. I walked into her office the next afternoon with a tote bag full of betrayal and handed it over. She didn't ask if I was sure. She didn't act shocked. She read through the first few papers and nodded slowly. "This is deep," she said. "You ready for this?" I didn't hesitate. Yes. And that was the start of it. We spent weeks combing through everything. I came in after work. On weekends, we mapped timelines, matched signatures, cross-checked account activity. Every new file was another brick in the wall Greg and Sharon had tried to build around me. Noelle found everything I had missed. Small details, backdated forms, hidden clauses. And then, buried deep in a pile of bank records, we found the real gem, the lake house. The same lake house they couldn't shut up about over dinner. Turns out, Greg had taken out a massive loan against it 3 years ago. Not just to renovate. Not to expand or flip or invest. But to bail out Lila. Apparently, her brilliant idea to launch a sustainable fashion brand had gone belly up before it even hit the shelves. Thousands of dollars down the drain. And instead of letting her deal with the consequences, they stepped in like they always did. But they didn't use their own money. They used mine. Accounts in my name. Documents forged to push the loan through. They had bet the lake house on a fantasy, and now they were behind on payments. That was the part that changed everything. Because now it wasn't just about pride or betrayal. It was about leverage. The bank had been patient, Noelle explained. They sent warnings. Grace periods. But things were slipping fast. In a matter of weeks, the house would go to auction if someone didn't swoop in. That's when I made my decision. I was going to buy it. Quietly. Legally. Completely. But not in my name, not at first. Noelle helped me set up a shell company. Clean. Untraceable to the family unless they knew exactly where to look, and trust me, they didn't. Greg barely understood how to navigate email without printing it first. The purchase wasn't simple. It took time. Calls. Paperwork. Back and forths with the bank. But I was calm through it all. I didn't rush. I didn't vent. I didn't tell a soul outside of Noelle. Because this wasn't about announcing a win. This was about preparing one. And every single day I watched Sharon's text messages roll in. "How's work? You busy this weekend? Dad wants help hanging shelves." I smiled. Because they still thought I was the same Maya. Still thought I was folding towels and biting my tongue. Still thought I was their quiet, agreeable insurance policy. I let them believe it. When Greg forwarded me a job listing with the subject line, "Thought this might be more your speed," I replied, "Thanks, I'll check it out." When Sharon called to complain about rising property taxes and how stressful finances have become lately, I told her, "Hang in there. I know things you'll smooth out." I never let my voice change. Never let it shake. And the day the final paperwork came in, the deed, the legal confirmations, the transfer of ownership, I didn't jump or cheer or celebrate. I just stood by my window and whispered, "Done." The lake house was mine now. Not because they gave it to me, but because I took it. Took it back. Took the years they tried to steal. The trust they shattered. The name they used like a tool. They'd always assumed I didn't have it in me. That I was too kind, too quiet, too loyal. But kindness isn't stupidity. And silence isn't surrender. I didn't need to ruin them. I didn't need to shout or burn bridges or smash glassware across the kitchen floor like in some overdramatic soap opera. All I had to do was stop playing my part. And suddenly, they were standing on a stage with no script. You want to know what real power looks like? It's not revenge. It's freedom. It's realizing you don't have to wait for an apology. You don't have to scream, "Look what you did to me." You just have to walk out of the scene. With the keys in your hand. There's something poetic about symmetry. About endings that mirror beginnings. About coming full circle. So when Christmas rolled around again, same tree, same cinnamon rolls, same garland Sharon reused every year, I knew exactly what I was walking into. Only this time, I wasn't the one holding my breath. They were. But they didn't know it yet. Greg was in high spirits that morning, the way he always was when the attention was about to shift to Lila. He wore his usual fun dad Christmas sweater, red with white snowflakes and a fake reindeer nose sewn onto the chest. He even had the matching socks. Lila loved that kind of kitschy coordination. Coffee's hot. Sharon called from the kitchen, already fussing over a tray of chocolate croissants like she'd made them from scratch and hadn't just unboxed them from the freezer section. I stood quietly by the fireplace, watching this scene unfold. It felt like déjà vu, Lila giggling under a blanket, sipping cocoa with whipped cream like she'd stepped out of a holiday commercial. Greg buzzing around her, making sure she was warm, fed, complimented every 5 minutes. Sharon offering her a refill before anyone else had even finished the first round. Me? I was background again. Just where they thought I belonged. Okay, Greg said, clapping his hands together like a man who just couldn't wait to see his favorite child shine. Let's start the gifts. Lila smiled, tucked her legs under her, and looked expectantly at the pile of designer-wrapped boxes stacked beside her. And yes, they were all hers. Tory Burch, Kate Spade, Godiva. Everything coordinated, color-coded, pre-labeled. From Mom and Dad, Sharon said, handing her the first one. Lila peeled the wrapping with the same dramatic flair she always used, pausing halfway to gasp, even though she'd probably seen the receipt. Oh my God, this bag. You remembered I mentioned it once months ago. Greg beamed like she'd just thanked him for curing world hunger. Of course I remembered. I sipped my tea waiting. Not because I wanted anything. Because I had something to give. And this year, it wasn't a reaction. It was a reminder. When the pile of gifts had been thoroughly unwrapped, admired, and Instagrammed, yes, she literally posted a story of it before we even moved on, Greg turned to me, his grin smug and teasing. You didn't forget your old man, did you? He said, nudging Sharon. I smiled and reached into my bag, pulling out a small white box. Plain, clean, no ribbon, no frills. Just sharp edges and something heavy inside. Not physically. Emotionally. Greg took it, shaking it like a child who thought he could guess the contents from the sound. Socks, he joked. Just open it, I said calmly. His laughter faltered slightly as he slid off the lid. Inside was an envelope, thick, ivory-colored, with an embossed seal. He frowned, then glanced at Sharon, who leaned in curiously. He opened it. The moment his eyes landed on the first page, everything stopped. His brow furrowed. His mouth opened, then closed. He flipped to the second page. Then the third. His hands trembled just slightly. Sharon leaned over his shoulder. She read the heading out loud slowly. Deed transfer and proof of ownership. Her voice trailed off. Her face went pale. Lila blinked, still half distracted by her phone. What is it? No one answered her. I waited for the silence to settle, thick and absolute, before I said the words I had waited an entire year to say. I own the lake house now. Greg looked up slowly, as if he'd misheard me. What? I bought it, I said, voice even. Legally. Months ago. Through a third party. It's mine. Lila laughed nervously. Wait. What? What do you mean you bought it? Greg started flipping through the paperwork again, like he was searching for a loophole. No, this can't be right. The bank, we just needed more time. I tilted my head, watching him with the kind of calm you only develop after a decade of being disregarded. The bank didn't think so. Sharon's lips parted, her voice shaky now. But that house, it was always meant to stay in the family. I looked right at her. You mean Lila's family? She didn't respond. Because she couldn't. That hesitation? That flicker of truth in her eyes? It said everything. Lila sat forward, alarm replacing confusion. You can't do that. I was going to use it for content. Dad said I could redesign the deck for my brand. It's part of the plan. It's not your house, I said flatly. Not legally. And definitely not anymore. Her jaw dropped, her face morphing into something unfamiliar, panic, maybe, or the very first moment of realizing the world might not always bend for her. Greg slammed the papers on the table. Do you have any idea what you've done? Yes, I said, standing. I've taken back what was stolen from me. He stared at me like I'd cursed in church. That house meant something to this family. I took a step closer. Really? The same family that forged my signature? Took out loans in my name? Used me like a pawn and never thought I'd find out. Sharon flinched. Lila turned to her, her voice rising. Wait, what does she mean forged? Is that true? Sharon opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Greg didn't deny it. He didn't need to. The silence was its own confession. We can fix this, Sharon said suddenly, her voice slipping into that soft, coaxing tone she used when she wanted me to be small. We can figure something out. Maybe we can trade. No. She blinked. No, she repeated, like she'd misheard. You don't get to negotiate with me, I said. Not anymore. Lila scoffed, her voice brittle. This is so dramatic. It's just a house. I turned to her, and for the first time in my life, I saw her clearly, not as the golden child, not as the sister who had everything, but as someone small. Someone who had never been told no. Someone who had built her identity around the assumption that people would always clean up her messes. It was never about the house, I said. Greg crossed his arms, jaw tight. You walk out that door, you're not welcome here again. I picked up my coat. I was never welcome here to begin with. And just like that, I walked out. No fireworks. No slamming doors. Just crisp winter air against my face and the sound of snow crunching under my boots. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't leaving something behind. I was walking toward something. Something that was mine. That night, I sat in the lake house by the window. A glass of wine in one hand, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The lake outside was frozen over, moonlight casting silver across its surface. It was quiet. Not lonely quiet. Peaceful quiet. The kind of silence that wraps around you like a soft promise. You did the right thing. And I believed it. Because this wasn't about revenge. This was about reclaiming my voice. And they heard it loud and clear, even though I never raised it once. Peace is such a strange feeling when you've lived your whole life without it. You expect it to feel like fireworks. Like drums. Like confetti exploding from the sky to celebrate the moment you finally broke free. But the truth? Peace is quiet. So quiet it almost feels like nothing. No applause. No rush. Just stillness. Stillness so profound it settles into your bones like warmth after a long walk through the cold. That night, Christmas night, I curled up in an armchair by the window of the lake house. My lake house. The one they thought they owned. The one they built with my name and still never thought to tell me about. I had a blanket over my legs, a glass of wine in my hand, and silence all around me. Not the suffocating kind I used to drown in at home. Not the silence of being ignored, dismissed, or forgotten. This silence was mine. And it felt like breathing for the first time. Outside, the lake was frozen, still and silver beneath the moonlight. Snow coated the trees like a powdered sugar dream. And for the first time in years, maybe ever, I wasn't waiting for anything. Not approval. Not affection. Not even closure. Because the truth is, I had stopped wanting closure. I used to think I needed it. Used to think I needed Greg and Sharon to sit across from me, heads bowed, shame in their eyes, saying the words they never had the courage to say. We were wrong. I imagined that moment 1,000 times, how I'd respond, how I'd let it all out. But now, I didn't want it anymore. Because I finally understood something that had taken me years to accept. Some people will never apologize. Not because they don't know they hurt you, but because they don't believe you deserved better in the first place. Greg wouldn't apologize. He would rationalize, maybe. Say it was for the family. That it wasn't a big deal. That I should be flattered, even that he trusted me enough to build something in my name. And Sharon? She'd say she didn't know. That she just signed what she was told to sign. That she wasn't the decision maker. That she didn't want to upset him. But they both knew what they were doing. They knew it every time they signed my name without asking. Every time they dipped into accounts that weren't theirs. Every time they smiled in my face and called me dependable, responsible, reliable, words that sounded like compliments but were just prettier ways of saying, we know you won't fight back. Well, I did. And now I was here. In a house they once idolized, now out of reach. I spent the next few days doing nothing extraordinary. I walked through the halls, noting the bones of the house, where it creaked, where it breathed, where it sighed from years of being mistreated. I opened every drawer, every cabinet. Not to be nosy. To reclaim. I found old contractor estimates. Paint swatches. Notes Greg had left in his sharp handwriting. Ask builder about deck extension. Lila wants space for events. Even here, I was invisible. But not anymore. I repainted the guest room that week. Changed the curtains. Took down the terrible artwork they'd hung to impress guests. I lit candles, not the stiff lavender ones Sharon used that smelled like bathroom soap, but deep, warm scents. Cinnamon, sandalwood, bergamot. The kind of scents that linger and make a place feel like a heartbeat. Slowly, room by room, I stripped their identity from this house and let mine grow in its place. I didn't rush. I didn't document it for anyone. I didn't send passive-aggressive updates or photos with smug captions. That would have been too easy. Too loud. Real freedom? It's quiet. That's what they never understood. They thought power meant control. Making decisions behind people's backs. Dictating the narrative. Owning the spotlight. But real power? It's walking away and never turning back. It's knowing you're free and not needing to prove it. About a week after Christmas, the calls started. First Sharon. Then Greg. Then Sharon again. I didn't answer. Her first voicemail was short. Call me when you get this. Then, we need to talk. About the house. Then, your father is very upset. Then, finally, her voice trembling with a carefully constructed edge of pain. I don't know why you're doing this. Oh, Sharon. You do. You just didn't expect me to ever do it back. Greg didn't bother with voicemails. He sent emails. Scanned copies of old documents. Subject lines like, let's be rational, and this isn't what you think. I didn't open most of them, because it didn't matter what they thought. Lila, of course, had the most dramatic reaction. A voice note filled with venom. You really think this makes you better than me? You think this makes you special? It's a house, Maya. A stupid house. You'll be miserable alone, and no one's going to feel sorry for you when you realize what you gave up. I smiled when I heard that one. Because that's the thing about people like Lila. They think punishment is being alone. They think solitude is a sentence. But for someone like me, someone who spent her whole life surrounded by people who made her feel invisible, being alone wasn't scary. It was peaceful. It was finally being able to hear my own voice without theirs drowning it out. I deleted the message. No response. No engagement. That was my power. And slowly, the calls stopped. The text slowed. Sharon's voicemails became less frequent. Greg stopped emailing. Lila moved on to whatever new, brand-building opportunity she was working on. I heard about them only through neighbors, relatives, the occasional social media post. Someone mentioned Greg looked more tired lately. That Sharon had started talking about downsizing. The lake house, it turned out, had been their safety net. The property they planned to use for loans, for retirement, for show. Without it, things started to crack. Not collapse yet, but strain. And me? I was fine. Better than fine. I was free. I fixed what needed fixing. Repaired what was worn. The house wasn't glamorous yet, but it was solid. And more than anything, it was mine. I started cooking again. Playing music while I worked. Reading books I'd abandoned when life got too loud. Sometimes I'd go days without speaking out loud, and I didn't miss the sound of anyone's voice. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting. Not for a compliment. Not for permission. Not for love. I had stopped playing the game, and that was the win. I didn't fantasize about them showing up at my door. I didn't rehearse speeches in the mirror anymore. I didn't replay memories wondering what I should have said differently. Because I finally realized there was never going to be a version of Greg or Sharon that gave me what I needed. That's not what they were built for. They were built to believe in one daughter. And I wasn't her. And that's okay. Because I was finally done begging for a place in a story that was never written for me. I had my own story now. One I wrote in my voice, at my pace, in my own damn house. And that was everything. Funny thing about storms, they don't just disappear when the rain stops. You're left with the wreckage. The broken branches, the water damage, the things you didn't even realize were cracked until sunlight hit them just right. That's how the weeks after Christmas felt. Quiet, but not clean. I wasn't surprised that Greg and Sharon went silent. They didn't know how to handle losing control, and silence was their version of a tantrum. They thought if they cut off communication, if they gave me the cold shoulder long enough, I'd crawl back with an apology, begging to be let back in. I didn't. I let their silence echo. And it sounded a lot like freedom. What did surprise me was how quickly the cracks started to show. It started with a neighbor. Someone I barely knew from years ago, a woman who used to come to our Christmas parties mostly for the free wine. I bumped into her at the grocery store. "Your parents," she said, lowering her voice like we were about to discuss a tragic illness. I heard things are tight. The way people say tight when they mean spiraling. When they mean they can't afford the new car anymore, or they're thinking of selling. I didn't respond. Because I didn't need to. Every word she said confirmed what I already knew. Greg had been banking on the lake house. Not just financially. Emotionally. That property was his badge of pride. He'd poured money into it thinking it would appreciate over time, become the family heirloom, the Lila legacy, the place where he could parade around like he'd built something from nothing. Without it, he was exposed. And Sharon? She was trying to hold the seams together the way she always did, quietly, passively, without any real confrontation. Probably emailing realtors behind Greg's back. Probably pushing Lila to monetize something. Probably rearranging deck furniture and pretending it was therapy. As for Lila? Well, she coped the only way she knew how, by pretending none of it touched her. She posted more. Fake smiles. Brunches. Hashtag campaigns. Yoga poses in borrowed leggings with affiliate codes in the caption. Her world was still carefully filtered and softly lit, but I could tell it was cracking too. The engagement numbers dropping. The fake enthusiasm harder to sell. The followers less forgiving. I didn't need to gloat. Didn't need to send a single "I told you so." Their lives were unraveling in quiet, exhausting ways. And none of it involved me. That was the key difference. For the first time, their dysfunction wasn't my responsibility. That realization hit one evening while I was fixing a loose cabinet hinge in the lake house kitchen. I was crouched on the floor, screwdriver in one hand, music playing low on my phone, when it struck me, I wasn't doing this to impress anyone. I wasn't performing competence. I wasn't proving my worth. I was just existing, taking care of something because it belonged to me. And that simple act? That was healing. Day by day, I made the house mine, not just legally, but emotionally, spiritually, intentionally. I painted the entryway a rich moss green, something earthy and bold. Replaced the old family photos with art prints I'd collected over the years, pieces that made me feel something. I donated Sharon's soulless centerpieces and replaced them with thrifted vases and wildflowers I gathered on walks. It didn't happen overnight. Healing never does. But piece by piece, I was shedding the version of myself they had molded, the quiet one, the invisible one, the compliant one. And what remained? Someone solid. Someone deliberate. Someone who knew her worth even when no one clapped for it. It was around this time that the messages slowed to nothing. No more voicemails from Sharon. No more passive-aggressive emails from Greg. No more voice notes from Lila dripping with faux concern. I'd become a void in their world, and the truth is, that probably scared them more than any confrontation ever could. Because when you're the family's emotional mule, when you carry the weight, the guilt, the responsibility, they don't expect you to walk away. They expect you to keep showing up. To keep smiling through the pain. To keep forgiving. But when you finally go quiet, when you cut the cord and don't look back, that's when they start to panic. And yet, I wasn't panicking at all. I started sleeping better, eating better. I started writing again. Short stories, mostly. Pieces that bled a little, stories about girls who vanished and came back stronger. Who returned to their childhood homes and burned the floorboards just to plant something better. I walked around the lake every morning. Watched the ice shift and thaw. The birds come and go. I'd never realized how beautiful the silence could be when it wasn't filled with the noise of proving myself. And then, one afternoon, a letter came. Handwritten. No return address. From Greg, of course. Because when control fails, you try nostalgia. Inside was a single sheet of paper. I don't know what's gotten into you. We were always a family. We made sacrifices. We tried our best. This has gone too far. I hope you come to your senses before it's too late. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just manipulation dressed as fatherly concern. I folded it neatly and put it in the fireplace. Watched it burn to ash. Then I made dinner. A week later, Sharon sent an email. Subject, checking in. Body, we're selling some things. Thought you might want to stop by and see if there's anything you'd like before we donate. That was her version of an olive branch. Not love. Not remorse. Just logistics. I didn't reply, because I didn't need things from them. I had my own now. One night, Lila posted a story, her crying in a car, no context. She deleted it within an hour, but not before a few people messaged me screenshots. I didn't respond to them either, because I'd learned the most important lesson of all: not everything broken is mine to fix. Let me say that again for the version of me who stayed up all those nights wondering what she did wrong. Not everything broken is yours to fix. Some people choose to hurt you. Some people choose not to see you. Some people only love you when they need something. And when they lose access to that, they flounder. Let them. You don't owe them a life raft when they were the ones who taught you how to drown. So I let them drift. And I stayed anchored. Not bitter. Not triumphant. Just whole. And that was more than I ever thought I'd get.